think we should introduce ourselves too.
You don't need to introduce yourself. Okay. Hi, I'm Kendall Ross. You don't need to know his name. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. And I am Con.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. According to Amnesty International, quote, Plan Colombia, the name for the U.S. aid package since 2000, was created as a strategy to combat drugs and contribute to peace, mainly through military means. The U.S. government began granting large amounts of aid to Colombia in 2000 under the Clinton administration. Since the beginning of Plan Colombia, the U.S. has given Colombia over $5 billion, with the vast majority going to Colombia's military and police, end quote. Plan Colombia was put into place in order to bring about peace in Colombia to help to combat drug trading and exporting. Plan Colombia should not be ended. To support these claims and push the resolution forward, we offer the following contentions. Contention 1. Plan Colombia is curbing drug production and transportation. That is our only contention. On to our first contention. Plan Colombia is curbing drug production and transportation. According to a study done by Live Science released in 2012, quote, illegal drug use causes about 250,000 deaths per year, according to the report, and use is highest in developed countries. The report is the first in a series of papers published in the journal that Lancet that addresses the burden of disease due to illicit drug use, end quote. With mortality rates that high, you have to consider where the drugs are coming from. The Washington Post refers to Colombia as the world's top coca producer, coca being the plant that is vital in the production of cocaine. Plan Colombia is helping to curb the production and transportation of this dangerous drug that is so prevalent in Colombia in order to sustain the livelihood of not only the Colombians, but also the United States. While some may argue that by cutting off drug production, you are harming the citizens whose main source of income comes from farming the coca plant, it's important to consider that, according to the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, another part of Plan Colombia and the United States assistance includes, quote, U.S. development assistance helps train farmers to grow crops other than coca, improve yields, rebuild schools, and create new partnerships to help small producers get goods to market, end quote. Our vital 2012 card shows that the U.S. aid package to Colombia from 2006 to 2011 helped rural families produce over 95,000 hectares of legal crops and created roughly 150,000 jobs. This sort of economic development is a massive part of Plan Colombia that has helped to empower the people. Stopping Plan Colombia would not only open the possibility for more drugs to come into the United States and harm our citizens, but it would harm the Colombian citizens consuming the drugs and force families who have developed other crops to return to farming the coca plant due to a drop-off in aid and the easy profits of the crop. It is of note that our Whitaker 2016 card shows that the U.S. cocaine consumption has dropped by over 50% in the last 10 years, which is massive progress, which may not have been possible without a front in Colombia to provide a way out of the drug trade. Thank you.
We rise in support of this case because Plan Colombia is both a failure in attempting to achieve its goals and has also led to collateral damage that amounts to the deaths of thousands of Colombian citizens and has severely damaged parts of the Colombian ecosystem. We interpret the resolution to mean that the United States has an obligation to end Plan Colombia. For the purposes of this debate, we use the Merriam-Webster definition of should, quote, used in an auxiliary function to express obligation, propriety, or expediency, end quote. Ultimately, the United States, if it wishes to achieve progress in Colombia, must change its approach in order to support a more legitimate and effective use of legal powers to end the coca trade and bring stability to Colombia. To support these claims and push the resolution forward, we offer the following contentions. Contention 1. Plan Colombia has failed to stop the cultivation of the coca plant, one of its primary goals. Cocaine production has actually increased in Colombia since the inception of the plan. Growers of coca have adapted to the mass spraying of herbicides intended to eradicate the coca crop. Contention 2. Attempts to stop cultivation with herbicide has led to poisoning of many people in rural areas, which has only increased the dependency on the coca production. Contention 3. Massive human rights abuses have occurred in order to achieve the plan's goals, which delegitimizes efforts to bring stability to end the coca trade. Subpoint A. Millions have been displaced inside Colombia by this plan, and subpoint B. Thousands of protesters, journalists, and trade unionists have been killed, with more being detained, tortured, or disappeared. On to our first contention. Plan Colombia has failed to stop the cultivation of the coca plant and is thus ineffective in achieving its goal of significantly combating drug use and trafficking. Our Broad Institute 2016 card supports our subpoint A by showing that areas under coca cultivation increased 44% in 2014. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, it also shows that total cocaine production increased 52% in the same year. The card continues saying that current indications lead them to believe further growth to have occurred in 2015. The card proves that efforts to clamp down on coca cultivation and cocaine production have abjectly failed after over 15 years of work under Plan Colombia. In support of our subpoint B, our Mejia 2016 card explains that growers explorers have adapted to eradication efforts by keeping seabeds in reserve and salvaging damaged plants, showing that Plan Columbia's methodology is ineffective in the face of determined growers. Regarding our second contention, when eradication efforts are successful, it is often through the now banned method of spraying herbicides from the air. The method not only kills coca crops, but poisons drinking water, destroys subsistence crops, animal life, and often has negative side effects on human health. This is supported by our Schaefer's and Young 2015 card, which notes that a branch of the World Health Organization stated that the herbicide used, glyphosate, is a carcinogenic material which will have a negative health impact on fumigated areas as time goes on. The card also notes that the poisoning of citizens exacerbates the problems of poverty that forced many small farmers to cultivate coca in the first place, only deepening their dependency on the crop. Furthermore, our Mejia 2016 card states this herbicide poisons drinking water, causes deforestation, and harms amphibious populations. The direct human impacts include an increase of health issues, most notably skin conditions and miscarriages. The card also finds that trust in public institutions falls heavily in areas where the government ravages the countryside livelihoods and health of the population, making these people all the more likely to support groups like FARC, which stand in opposition to the government and ultimately lead to a greater instability, the exact opposite of what Plan Colombia was supposed to achieve. Finally, on to our third contention, Plan Colombia has led to a massive number of human rights abuses in the name of counterinsurgency, which will only serve to delegitimize efforts to secure lasting peace between political factions and cut down on coca cultivation and trade. Our Lazusa 2016 card shows that only some of the massive internal damage done on the part of the Colombian government with American support since the inception of the plan. It states that more than 6 million Colombian citizens have been victimized since the program began, including more than 4 million people displaced from their homes and more than 3,500 civilians murdered by Colombian security forces, who disguised many of the victims as guerrillas in order to inflate the tally of enemies killed. This directly supports our subpoints A and B by showing the lengths the government armed forces are willing to go in order to achieve their goals, displacing millions of their own citizens and killing thousands of others before framing their deaths as combat scenes in order to inflate their own so-called successes. Our Carousel 2016 card goes on saying that since the plan's inception, more than 1,000 trade unionists and at least 370 journalists have been killed. At least 400 human rights defenders were murdered, with many more activists tortured, disappeared, kidnapped, or detained. And nearly 500,000 women were subjected to sexual violence from 2001 to 2009. These egregious human rights abuses, often committed in order to inflate government successes and silent political opposition, ultimately serve to delegitimize the Colombian government and its backer, the United States. These actions directly violate the rights of all victims and put the government in the position of a great oppressor, rather than an institution fighting for law, order, and justice.
So for cross-examination, I want to make sure that I have all the taglines of your contentions. So Can you reread the tagline of your first contention and any subpoints?
Okay, the contention was Plan Colombia has failed to stop cultivation of the coca plant, one of its primary goals. Subpoint A, cocaine production has actually increased in Colombia since the inception of the plan. Subpoint B, growers of coca have adapted to the mass spraying of herbicides intended to eradicate the coca crop.
Okay, and then
contention. Do you want me to the rest of the contentions?
So for the tagline of your second contention, it addressed poisoning of the citizens in Colombia, and then your third contention addressed the human rights abuses.
Yeah.
Okay. Your question.
Let's see. What do you consider to be the main goal of Plan Colombia?
The main goal of Plan Colombia would be to stop in any way or slow down in any way possible the production and cultivation of the coca plant in Colombia, as well as provide training and insurgency tactics to the own guerrilla forces that are in the area in order to combat other organizations like FARC that are using the coca plant as a means of gaining more economic support.
Okay, can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
You said in your case you cited live science that cocaine production has actually decreased in Colombia, but we have a 2016 Brodinski card that shows that it has actually increased by 44%.
Well, the card, I'll just reread the quote. It's illegal drug use causes about 250,000 deaths per year, according to the report. It was mainly attacking or addressing the drug deaths that have come.
Can I ask one more follow-up question?
Yes.
But can you actually claim that Plan Colombia has been effective if like you said, one of its main goals was to slow down and stop the coca plant production when it has actually been increasing?
Well, Plan Colombia also provided a more of an observation as to what the economy in Colombia is like with the production and the cultivation of the coca plant. And with my card in my first contention from the Washington Post, as well as the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition, it shows that not only is coca the the largest single production of a crop in Colombia. It's also the only crop that farmers are being forced to produce. And because of this...
Sorry, can I ask a question? How are farmers being forced to
guerrilla groups like FARC are impressing these people in order to grow the coca plant, and by growing the coca plant, they are being forced into a position where they don't find any incentive to grow any other crop, whether it's any crop native to Colombia or anything that they could use to benefit.
So you're saying that they're being forced to do it, but one of the main goals of Plan Colombia was provide training to these people to be able to stop growing things. So are you saying that Plan Colombia has failed in this aspect in both stopping to grow the coca plant and providing training for the people who you are saying are being forced?
We're not saying that Plan Colombia doesn't have its faults, but we are saying that total abolition of Plan Colombia in the future would be detrimental to the area as a whole, because the United States still continues to offer military training to people in these areas in order to fight FARC, and if not that, best case scenario...
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
How has it not been detrimental already when you read that like 6 million human rights abuses have been abused over the past, since the inception of Plan Colombia?
Well, we argue that with the human rights abuses in Colombia, I mean, it's just it's more of a casualty of the area as a whole, and plus, there's reason to believe that these human rights abuses are also being caused by FARC itself, and we agree that these abuses do need to be addressed. The best way to do it would not just to be ignoring it altogether.
But we're not ignoring it. Plan Colombia has been in place for like 16 years and it hasn't done anything.
Abolitioning the plan would be detrimental because we're not providing any other kind of like blanket or security blanket for the people in Colombia. We're essentially abandoning them.
But in some ways, with the United States in Colombia, they have hurt the citizens more than if the United States would not have been there.
The con would be in favor of more possibly UN oversight, but simply by eliminating the security blanket that has already been in place in Colombia for several years would be more detrimental than by currently fixing the plan.
Okay, you can have a question.
Okay, so whenever you talk about let's go to just the topic of Plan Colombia has to stop the production of coca.